The door flew open with a bang that echoed through the entire house. There stood my father, his face twisted in disgust as he stared at Christopher and me, our hands still linked from the moment we'd shared a quick kiss in what I thought was a safe corner of the backyard during the family reunion. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, while Christopher squeezed my hand tighter, his calm blue eyes meeting my father's furious gaze without flinching. In that instant, everything I'd been taught since childhood crashed down around me. My family, devout Christians in a small Texas town just outside Austin, had drilled into me that loving another man was a sin, a weakness that would destroy our reputation and the family construction business my grandfather built from nothing. "Get away from my son," Dad roared, lunging forward like he could physically rip us apart. I stepped in front of Christopher, my voice shaking but determined for the first time in 27 years. "Dad, stop. This is who I am." The backyard barbecue, meant to celebrate my cousin's engagement, turned into chaos in seconds. My mother dropped her plate of potato salad, her hand flying to her mouth. My younger sister, Emily, stared wide-eyed from the picnic table, while uncles and aunts whispered behind their red plastic cups. Christopher, ever the steady one, kept his voice low. "Mr. Ramirez, I care about Hector. This isn't some phase." But Dad wasn't listening. He grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the house, his grip bruising. "Inside. Now. We're fixing this before the whole town hears." I glanced back at Christopher as my uncle practically shoved him toward the driveway. His truck was parked under the oak tree where we'd first talked for hours last spring, back when I was still pretending I could fight what I felt. 6 months of secret coffee runs, late-night texts, and stolen weekends in the city had led to this. I had told myself it was harmless, that I could keep the two worlds separate. Now the collision was here, and it hurt worse than any sermon I'd endured growing up. Inside the kitchen, Dad paced while Mom wiped tears with a dish towel. "Hector, we've raised you better. The Bible is clear. This is the devil testing you." Her voice cracked, and for a second I almost apologized like I always had after youth group confessions. But Christopher's words from our last date echoed. "You don't have to carry their shame anymore." I straightened my shoulders. "I'm not sick. I'm not broken. I love him, and I'm done pretending." Dad slammed his fist on the counter. "Love? That's not love. That's confusion. You'll lose everything, the business, this family, your future. Think about your mother. Think about the church." Emily slipped in quietly, her phone in hand, probably already texting friends. The weight of their stares pressed on me like the humid Texas air outside. I had spent years volunteering at the youth center, leading Bible studies, dating girls from the congregation just to fit the mold. All of it to make them proud. Now the mask was gone, and the fear in their eyes mirrored the fear I'd buried for so long. By midnight, Christopher had texted me from a motel on the highway. "I'm okay. Call when you can. I believe in you." I lay on my old twin bed surrounded by high school trophies and crosses on the wall, replaying the kiss Dad had witnessed. It was innocent, just a moment of relief after hiding for months. But it had shattered the lie I'd lived. Tomorrow the rumors would spread through town faster than wildfire. My boss, who was also my uncle, would hear. Clients who trusted the Ramirez name would question everything. I didn't sleep. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and felt the first crack in the foundation I'd been forced to build. For the first time, the idea of walking away didn't feel like failure. Felt like breathing. When the sun rose, I packed a duffel bag with clothes and the one photo of Christopher and me from a weekend in San Antonio. Downstairs, Dad was already on the phone with the pastor. Mom offered me breakfast like nothing had changed. I refused both. "I'm moving out today," I said quietly. "I love you, but I can't live like this anymore." The drive to Christopher's apartment in Austin felt like crossing into another country. He opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a hug that smelled like coffee and safety. "You don't have to explain," he whispered. But I did. I told him everything. The sermons, the forced prayers, the nights I cried alone convinced God hated me. Christopher listened without judgment, his hand steady on my back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for existing. That afternoon, my phone blew up with messages. Emily sent a single text. Dad says don't come back until you repent. My uncle texted that my position at the company was under review. The family group chat went silent except for Bible verses. I stared at the screen until Christopher took the phone and set it aside. This is going to get harder before it gets better, he said. But you're not alone. I nodded, but inside the storm was just beginning. The man who had raised me to be strong now saw me as weak. The family that taught me loyalty now demanded I betray myself. And the love I had finally allowed myself to feel was the very thing that might cost me everything. Yet as I looked at Christopher's kind face, I knew one truth I could no longer deny. I was done bowing my head. The first week at Christopher's apartment passed in a haze of takeout boxes and quiet conversations that stretched until dawn. He worked as a high school counselor downtown, helping kids navigate the same pressures I'd just escaped, while I tried to figure out what my days looked like without the family business schedule. Every morning I woke up expecting Dad's truck in the driveway, ready to drag me home for another intervention. Instead, there was only Christopher making coffee, his dark hair still messy from sleep, asking how I felt without pushing. On Wednesday, my mother called. Her voice was soft, the way it used to be when I was sick as a kid. Hector, your father is hurting. The church is praying for you. Come home for dinner Sunday. We can talk. I almost said yes out of habit. Christopher watched from the kitchen table, giving me space. Mom, I can't pretend anymore, I answered. But I love you. Tell Dad that. She hung up crying, and the guilt hit me like a hammer. I had always been the good son, the one who stayed late at job sites, the one who never questioned the rules. Now I was the problem. Christopher suggested we go for a walk along Lady Bird Lake to clear my head. The Austin skyline glittered across the water. Joggers and dogs moving like nothing in the world was breaking apart. My parents didn't speak to me for 2 years after I came out, he admitted as we sat on a bench. They thought it was a phase too. Then my little brother got in trouble at school, and suddenly they needed my help. It took time, but they came around. I wanted to believe that could happen for me. But my family wasn't like his progressive California relatives. We were Texas through and through, Sunday potlucks, football, and fire and brimstone sermons. Back at the apartment, my phone rang again. This time it was my best friend from high school, Marcus, who still worked at the company. Dude, what the hell? Your dad told everyone you had a breakdown. Said some guy brainwashed you. His voice carried the same tone we'd used when teasing each other about girls in 10th grade. I tried to explain, but the words stuck. Marcus sighed. Look, I don't care who you love, but the uncles are talking about cutting your shares. Think about your mom. She's not eating. The call ended with him promising to keep praying for me. I threw the phone across the room, and Christopher caught it before it hit the wall. They're using guilt like a weapon, he said gently. Don't let them. That night we sat on the tiny balcony watching city lights. Christopher shared stories from his own journey. College in New York, losing his first love to distance, building a life where he didn't have to hide. I told him about the summer I was 16 and kissed a boy at church camp, then spent months in extra prayer sessions begging God to change me. He didn't laugh or pity me. He just held my hand and said, You survived that. You'll survive this. Friday brought the first real blow. My uncle called to say my name was removed from the company website and that my final paycheck would be mailed. Family decision, he grunted. No explanation needed. I stared at the email confirmation, feeling the ground shift. The business was supposed to be my future, foreman by 30, partner by 40. Now it was gone in one signature. Christopher came home from work and found me on the couch, staring at nothing. He didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, he pulled out his laptop and started searching job listings for construction managers in Austin. You're qualified. We'll make it work. Saturday, Emily showed up unannounced at the door, her eyes red. Dad says if you don't come to church tomorrow and apologize, he's changing the will. She hugged me quickly, whispering, I don't understand, but I miss you. Watching her drive away, I felt the crack widen. My little sister, the one I'd taught to ride a bike, now saw me as a stranger. Christopher wrapped his arms around me from behind. You're allowed to grieve what you're losing, but don't forget what you're gaining. Sunday morning I woke up early, the old habit pulling me toward church. Instead, I made pancakes, a small rebellion. Christopher laughed when I burned the first batch, and for a moment the apartment felt like home. We spent the day exploring a street fair, holding hands openly for the first time. No one stared. No one shouted. The freedom tasted strange, like air after years underwater. But Monday brought reality. A former client emailed asking why I was no longer with Ramirez Construction. I replied honestly and received silence. Bills were due. My savings wouldn't last forever. Christopher offered to cover rent until I found something, but pride stung. That evening, over Thai food, he said, "Love isn't about keeping score. Let me help while you stand up." His words landed softly, and I realized I was learning a new kind of strength, one that didn't require proving anything to my father. The week ended with another family text blast. A group prayer request for Hector's struggle. I almost replied with anger. Christopher stopped me. They'll either grow or they won't. Your job is to grow. As I fell asleep that night, his steady breathing beside me, I felt the shift inside. The boy who once bowed his head in shame was becoming a man who lifted his eyes to the future. The cost was high, but the freedom was real. 2 months blurred together in a rhythm of job applications and late-night talks. I landed interviews at 3 construction firms, each one asking about the sudden gap in my resume. Family differences, I learned to say without flinching. Christopher coached me through mock questions, his counselor skills turning my nerves into confidence. At night, we cooked simple meals and watched documentaries about civil rights leaders, drawing parallels I never would have seen before. Slowly, the apartment stopped feeling temporary and started feeling ours. Then came the betrayal I never saw coming. Marcus called on a Thursday evening, voice tight. "Listen, man, your sister showed the whole youth group your old texts to that guy from camp. They're saying you're a danger to the kids." My stomach dropped. Emily had gone through my old phone when I left it charging at home one visit. The screenshots were everywhere now, private confessions I'd deleted years ago. Christopher listened on speaker, his jaw tight. "This is their fear talking," he said after Marcus hung up. But fear had power in our town. 2 days later, the local paper ran a community concern letter about moral leadership at Ramirez Construction. My uncle forwarded it with one line, "See what you've done?" I drove to the old job site on impulse, parking across the street like a stranger. Workers I had trained waved awkwardly. Dad's truck was there. Same dent in the bumper from the time I backed it into a pole at 16. The sight hit harder than I expected. Christopher met me afterward at a park bench, bringing coffee the way I liked it. "You built that company too," he reminded me. "They can't take the years you gave." His words helped, but the ache remained. At my new job interview the next week, the hiring manager, a no-nonsense woman named Linda, didn't blink when I mentioned the family split. "We value integrity here," she said. I started the following Monday as assistant project manager. The paycheck was smaller, the commute longer, but the office didn't whisper behind my back. Christopher celebrated with tickets to a comedy show downtown. Laughing together in the dark theater felt like medicine. Family silence stretched into its 3rd month. Then Mom texted a single photo, the old family cabin up in the hill country, the one where we spent every 4th of July. No message, just the image. I showed Christopher. "She's reaching out," he said. "But you get to decide how." I replied with a simple "miss you too." The response came hours later. "Dinner next week? Just us." I agreed before doubt could stop me. The dinner was at a neutral restaurant in Austin, away from prying eyes. Mom arrived first, hugging me so tightly I smelled her familiar lavender perfume. "Your father wouldn't come," she admitted, eyes shiny. "But I needed to see you." We talked carefully. My new job, her garden, anything but the elephant in the room. Then she slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $10,000. "For a fresh start," she whispered. "I love you, Hector. That hasn't changed." Tears burned my eyes. Christopher had warned me about strings, but in that moment I saw only my mother trying to bridge the gap. The next day at work, Linda pulled me aside. There's a big project in San Antonio. Lead role if you want it. The promotion meant travel, more responsibility, and a chance to prove myself outside the family shadow. I accepted immediately. Christopher was thrilled when I told him over dinner. "This is your moment," he said, raising his glass. We toasted to new chapters, and for the first time I believed the words. But peace never lasted long in my world. Emily called at midnight, voice panicked. "Dad found out about Mom's check. He's furious. Says if you cash it, you're cut off completely." I stared at the ceiling while Christopher rubbed my back. The choice was clear. Take the money and lose any chance of reconciliation, or return it and keep hoping. I chose hope. The next morning I drove the check back to Mom's house, leaving it in her mailbox with a note. "I love you too. No strings needed." Work in San Antonio kept me busy for the next 3 weeks. Christopher visited on weekends, exploring the river walk hand in hand. One evening we watched the sunset from a bridge, and he said quietly, "I'm proud of you." The words landed deep. I had spent years earning pride from my father. Now it came freely from the man I loved. Back in Austin, friends from my new job invited us to a barbecue. No one asked awkward questions. No one prayed over my struggle. Just normal conversation and laughter. The contrast with my old life was stark. Yet the past refused to stay buried. A letter arrived from the church elders requesting a meeting for restoration. Christopher read it with me. "You don't owe them anything," he said. I knew he was right, but the little boy who once memorized verses still whispered doubts. I declined the meeting politely. The response was immediate silence, but I felt the door closing for good. One Friday, Marcus showed up at my new office unannounced. "I was wrong to ghost you," he admitted, hat in hand. "The guys at church are split. Some think your dad went too far." We grabbed coffee, and for an hour it felt like old times. He even asked about Christopher. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. That night I told Christopher everything. He smiled. "See? The world is bigger than one family's opinion." As summer turned to fall, I started noticing changes in myself. The constant knot in my stomach was gone. I laughed louder, slept deeper, dreamed without guilt. Christopher noticed too. "You're standing taller," he teased one morning. I pulled him close, the kind of easy affection that once terrified me. The journey wasn't over. Family wounds still stung, but I was no longer the man who bowed his head. I was learning to walk forward. The San Antonio project stretched into winter, bringing longer hours and bigger decisions. I led a team of 20, negotiating with suppliers who had once known me only as the Ramirez Kid. The independence felt exhilarating and terrifying at once. Christopher balanced it all with his school schedule, driving down every other weekend with care packages of my favorite snacks. Our phone calls became the highlight of my days. Stories of his students, my sight challenges, and quiet affirmations that kept me grounded. Then the holidays arrived like a storm. Thanksgiving was the first without family, and the emptiness hit harder than expected. Christopher invited me to his parents' house in California, but I wasn't ready for that leap. Instead, we hosted a small dinner in Austin with Marcus and a couple of new friends from work. Turkey, laughter, and no sermons. It was healing in its simplicity. Mom sent a text wishing me well. Dad stayed silent. I replied to her with a photo of the table, hoping it was enough. December brought the company Christmas party. Linda announced my promotion to full project manager in front of everyone. Applause echoed, and for the first time I felt pride that belonged only to me. Christopher flew in for the weekend, wearing the navy sweater I loved. We danced awkwardly at the party, ignoring the curious glances. Later, walking through downtown lights, he stopped under a giant tree and said, "I love the man you're becoming." The kiss that followed was soft and sure, the kind that promised forever without needing words. But peace invited challenge. 2 days before Christmas, Emily called in tears. "Dad had a heart scare. He's in the hospital. He keeps asking for you." The news landed like a punch. Christopher booked me a flight without hesitation. "Go," he said simply. "I'll be here when you get back." The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. Dad looked smaller in the bed, monitors beeping steadily. Mom hovered, eyes pleading. I stood in the doorway, unsure. "Son," he rasped. I was wrong about a lot. The words hung between us. We didn't solve anything that night, but I stayed until visiting hours ended, holding space for whatever came next. Christmas Day, I flew home to Christopher. We opened simple gifts, a new toolbox for me, a framed photo of us for him. No drama, just us. New Year's Eve, we watched fireworks from the balcony, toasting to the year ahead. "Whatever comes," Christopher said, "we face it together." I believed him completely. January brought the real test. The company offered me a permanent role in San Antonio, a huge step up with relocation assistance. I discussed it with Christopher over dinner. "I'll go with you," he said without hesitation. "My contract ends in June. We can make a new life." The decision felt right, like the next logical chapter. We started packing boxes on weekends, laughing over which mugs to keep. Then betrayal struck again. A church member posted online about the Ramirez family division, tagging local businesses and suggesting clients avoid anyone associated with me. Business calls slowed. Linda pulled me aside. "It's noise," she assured me. "But we need to stay focused." Christopher researched lawyers quietly, preparing for any escalation. "They're scared of what they can't control," he reminded me. His steadiness kept me from spiraling. One cold February evening, Marcus drove down from the old town. Over pizza, he admitted the youth group had split, half supporting the family's stance, half quietly questioning. "Your story is making people think," he said. I didn't want to be anyone's poster child, but the idea that my choice mattered beyond my pain felt strangely empowering. Valentine's Day we kept simple. Dinner at home, candles, and honest conversation about the future. Christopher shared his fears about leaving his students. I confessed worries about Dad's health. We held each other through both. The next morning, Mom called. "Your father wants to meet Christopher." The request stunned me. Christopher squeezed my hand. "If you're ready, I am." The meeting happened at a neutral park in Austin. Dad arrived leaning on a cane, Mom beside him. Awkward handshakes turned into careful conversation. Christopher spoke about his work with kids, his values, his love for me. Dad listened, jaw tight but eyes softer than I'd seen in months. "I still don't understand," he admitted at the end. "But I see you're happy." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. We parted with cautious hope. Spring arrived with moving plans solidifying. I signed the San Antonio lease while Christopher wrapped up his school year. Friends threw us a going-away barbecue. Marcus hugged me tight. "Proud of you, man." The support from unexpected places carried me through the final weeks. The night before the move, Christopher and I sat on the empty living room floor. "We did this," he said. "You did this." I looked at the man who had stood beside me through every storm and felt the full weight of gratitude. The boy who once hid was now building a life in the open. The road ahead held unknowns, but with Christopher, it felt like home. Moving day dawned bright and clear. Trucks loaded, Austin in the rearview, San Antonio waiting like a promise. Christopher drove the first leg while I navigated traffic, our playlist mixing old country and new indie. Halfway there we stopped for tacos, laughing about the ridiculous number of boxes. The new apartment overlooked the river, sunlight pouring through tall windows. Unpacking felt like planting seeds for a future we chose. My first week on the new site was intense. Bigger team, higher stakes, clients who expected results. I thrived on the challenge, coming home each night to Christopher's cooking and steady presence. He started applying for counseling positions locally, landing interviews quickly. Evenings we walked the river walk, hands linked openly, no longer glancing over our shoulders. The freedom still surprised me sometimes. Then came the call that tested everything. Emily's voice shook. "Dad's in surgery again. Complications from the heart thing. He asked me to tell you he loves you." I booked the next flight back, Christopher insisting on coming too. The hospital waiting room felt smaller than before. Mom hugged us both without hesitation. When Dad woke, he looked at Christopher and nodded once. "Thank you for being here," he said quietly. The words weren't perfect, but they were progress. We stayed 3 days, sharing meals and stories that slowly bridged years of silence. Back in San Antonio, work demanded focus. A major deadline loomed, and I pulled long hours. Christopher supported without complaint, bringing dinner to the site one rainy night. "You're incredible," he whispered in the truck cab. His belief fueled me through the crunch. The project finished on time, earning praise from leadership. Linda called personally. "You're the future of this company, Hector." Summer brought heat and healing. We hosted our first barbecue for new colleagues. Marcus flew down for the weekend, fitting in like he'd always belonged. One evening, Dad texted a simple photo of the family cabin with the words, "Doors open." Christopher read it over my shoulder. "Go when you're ready." I replied with a date, and for the first time in a year, the family group chat lit up with cautious plans. The cabin weekend was quiet. No big speeches, just fishing and meals. Dad and I sat on the dock at sunset. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of losing you. Scared of what people would say." I told him about the nights I prayed to be different. He listened without interrupting. "I'm still learning," he said finally. Mom hugged Christopher goodbye with real warmth. Small steps, but each one mattered. Fall arrived with routine and joy. Christopher started at a local high school, loving his new students. We adopted a rescue dog named Max, who filled the apartment with chaos and laughter. Weekends we explored the hill country, building memories that belonged only to us. One crisp October day at a pumpkin patch, Christopher pulled me aside. "I want to spend every season with you," he said, slipping a simple ring on my finger. The proposal was quiet, perfect. I said yes through tears. The holidays that year looked different. We split time between San Antonio and the cabin. Dad carved the turkey while Christopher helped Mom with pies. Laughter replaced tension. Emily brought her new boyfriend, and conversations flowed naturally. Not everyone understood fully, but love was present. Winter brought reflection. I stood on the balcony one night, Max at my feet, thinking about the man I used to be. The forced prayers, the hidden texts, the shame I carried like armor. Christopher joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You've come so far," he murmured. I turned and kissed him, the kind of kiss that held gratitude and promise. Spring brought another milestone. We bought a small house with a yard for Max. Painting walls and planting flowers felt like claiming space in the world. Marcus visited with his family, and we grilled in the backyard. Life had settled into something beautiful and ordinary. Yet one shadow remained. An old church friend reached out online, sharing that the youth group still used my story as a cautionary tale. The message stung, but I replied with honesty instead of anger. "I'm happy. That's the truth." The exchange ended without resolution, but I slept peacefully afterward. I no longer needed their approval. As another year turned, I looked at Christopher across the kitchen table, Max snoring at our feet. The journey from that slammed door to this moment had been painful, necessary, and worth every tear. I had refused to deny my love, and in doing so, found myself. The man who once bowed his head now stood tall beside the person who made every risk worthwhile. The years settled gently after that. Our house became a home filled with books, photos, and the kind of quiet routines that heal old wounds. Christopher thrived at his school, mentoring students who reminded me of my younger self. I rose through the company ranks, eventually leading major regional projects that took us to new cities together. Max grew old gracefully, chasing balls in the backyard while we watched from the porch swing. Family gatherings evolved too. Dad and I never had the dramatic movie reconciliation, but we built something real. Sunday calls, shared projects at the cabin, honest conversations about faith and love. Mom knitted blankets for our couch and hugged Christopher like a son. Emily married and had a daughter we spoiled rotten. The Ramirez name carried forward, but on terms that included all of us. One crisp autumn afternoon, Christopher and I drove back to the old Austin apartment complex just to see it. The building looked smaller now. We stood in the parking lot holding hands, remembering the scared man who had arrived with a duffel bag and a broken heart. "You saved me," I told him quietly. He smiled. "You saved yourself. I just walked beside you." Work took us to New Orleans for a conference that spring. We walked the French Quarter at dusk, jazz floating through the streets. Christopher stopped under a street lamp and said, "Remember when you thought this kind of happiness wasn't for people like us?" I laughed softly. The fear that once defined me felt like a distant story now. Back home, we hosted a big backyard party for friends old and new. Marcus brought his kids. Linda flew in from headquarters. Even a few former church members who had quietly changed their minds stopped by. Laughter echoed late into the night. As guests left, Christopher and I sat under the stars. "This is what freedom feels like," I said. He rested his head on my shoulder. "This is what love built." Time moved on. We traveled when we could. Hiking in Colorado, beaches in Florida, quiet weekends in the mountains. Each trip added layers to our story. We volunteered at youth centers, sharing pieces of our journey with kids who needed to hear that being true to yourself didn't mean losing everything. The work felt meaningful, a way to turn pain into purpose. One quiet evening, Dad called. His voice was steady. "I'm proud of the man you've become, son." The words landed softly, no conditions attached. I hung up and told Christopher, tears in my eyes. He pulled me close. "You earned that." Years later, sitting on the same porch swing with Gray in our hair and Max's grandpup at our feet, I looked at the life we'd built. The boy forced to see his love as wrong had become a man who knew better. The family that once rejected me had learned to embrace us. The world hadn't ended when I stopped bowing my head. It had opened wider than I ever imagined. Christopher squeezed my hand. "Worth every step?" he asked. I kissed him softly. "Every single one. True or false. A man can only find lasting peace after he stops letting others define his love for another man."